Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, Attorney Henry Gornbein. Today I'm very pleased to welcome as my guest on Gracefully Graying, Lisa Neilson, who is now a candidate for the Oakland County Circuit Court judge. And Lisa, you and I go back to, I remember when you were a clerk for Linda Hallmark in the Oakland County Circuit and Probate Court. So we go way, way back. Welcome to Gracefully Graying. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Henry. Yeah, that was the year 2000.
So that's 26 years ago. Wow.
It really is. Yeah, I started my legal career in the Oakland County Circuit Court, well, family court with Linda Hallmark in 2000 as a court clerk when I would have first met you. Yeah, so it's been a while.
So why don't you welcome, first of all, Lisa, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your background? And I know you have a very extensive background and a very impressive one, so tell us about it.
Thank you. So I think that, since we met in 2000 when I was Judge Hallmark's court clerk, I have done quite a bit, and all of it centered on family, right? So I've devoted my entire legal career to families in crisis. So, and that goes back to my own personal story. Back in the early or the mid 90s, I was a stay-at-home mom with 4 little kids, and I went through a very difficult divorce. And when I was going through that process, I would have hoped that I had a judge who listened to my story and would make decisions that would impact my family in a favorable manner. And that didn't really happen. So that really started my passion for being involved in the court system, being involved in the family court. So I finished my undergrad degree, got a degree in paralegal studies. And then when I was able to, I went to law school full time. So while I was working for Judge Hallmark in 2000, that is the year I started law school, and I graduated in 2003. And then I became her staff attorney. So since then, I haven't looked back. I have devoted my entire legal career to family court. I was her staff attorney. I left after about 6 years, and then I became a family law practitioner. I did court appointments and retained clients in the same court, in Oakland County Court, until ultimately my appointment in 2012 to the family court, where I served for 10 years as a family court judge.
And that was in the Wayne County Family Court.
Yeah, it was. So I was in Wayne County for those years. I married my husband, who had a daughter in high school in Grosse Pointe. So I relocated to Wayne County. I got my appointment, and so I lived in Wayne County for those 10 years. And then COVID happened, right? And it impacted our family like it impacted many families. It helped us have a discussion about moving back to Oakland County. We have 9 grandchildren in Oakland County, and my children reside in Oakland County. So ultimately, we moved back to Oakland County and downsized, or we call it right-sized, into a little home in Birmingham, and that's our permanent stop for life. So we're here back in Oakland County. When I left the bench in 2022, I pursued a master's degree in social work at the University of Michigan, and ultimately graduated in 2024. So I hope to bring my perspective from my studies in social work, along with my experience of 10 years in the family court, along with my experience as court staff, along with my experience as a family law practitioner, back to the court to be able to provide Oakland County voters with a unique opportunity to vote for a judge who has all this experience to the family court. I will say that while voters are voting for a judge to the Circuit Court of Oakland County, we do know it's a family court position. So the judge who is elected, who the voters elect in, will be seated in the family court.
That's an important point, Lisa. So many judges become elected to the bench, and they look upon the family court as perhaps a stepping stone or a punishment, for lack of a better word. It's a difficult court because you're dealing with the myriad of human emotions along with the legal and psychological dynamics, which based upon the fact that you have a law degree and now you have a master's in social work, and as well as your life experience, gives you a lot of insight and experience in these areas. So tell us what prompted you to really decide to return to the bench after spending some time away.
Yeah, so when I left the bench in 2022, it certainly wasn't something I wanted to do. It was the right decision for our family, but I wasn't done being a judge. I loved being a judge. I am a public servant at heart. When I was a judge, I worked very hard with my knowledge of, former court staff, as a litigation attorney, as a judge. The privilege of being a judge brings with it an opportunity to effectuate some changes, or to be able to figure out unique and novel ideas and approaches to the family court to help improve outcomes for families. And I was really involved in that, right? So when I was a family court judge, I developed a docket with the William Booth Legal Aid Clinic that helped with folks who were self-represented in the court, who were navigating the court and having difficulty navigating the court. And so we were able to develop a docket in collaboration with the clinic where University of Detroit law students would help them navigate the court, would represent them, would come to court under the supervision of attorneys at the clinic. And so they would get their experience, court experience, the students would, while helping self-represented litigants be able to improve their outcomes and be able to navigate the court with more confidence. And it helped me as a judge with my case management. So it helped me, it helped the self-represented litigants, and it helped the UDM law students get their experience. It was an example of how we can do better, how outcomes can be improved for folks who are navigating the family court system. I'm very passionate about that. And as a public servant, I believed that you should continue to learn and not just accept the status quo. I even as a judge took mediation training at Oakland Mediation Center because I require it of the litigants, most litigants who appear before the court. All judges do in the family court. And I wanted to make sure I knew what I was ordering and requiring litigants and attorneys to do as part of the case docket. And I learned that there's real value to mediation, but I wanted to know that for myself. So as a public servant, I am driven to and I'm reminded by, my experience back in the 90s, I am driven to figure out how to improve outcomes for folks who are navigating the family court. And that desire is very strong, especially with my master's degree. And I want to be really clear, you have to follow the law. The law always prevails. But understanding family dynamics and the trauma that brings people into court just gives me a deeper understanding of human nature on how perhaps the court can help a family in crisis within the legal authority that binds the court.
In the last several years, what you've done is, judges speak of having various tools in a toolbox, and you've added a lot of tools that most people don't have. I mean, having not only the law degree, but 10 years of experience on the bench, as well as a master's in social work and your mediation training, gives you a lot of really more tools and insight than most people have. And one point I want to raise that I think is important, Lisa, is the fact that you will stay on the family court. In other words, your goal is not to become just a general civil litigator, but your goal on the bench is to remain on the family court and put to use all of your experience and training that you've acquired over these many years, both in practice on the bench and with your master's in social work.
Yeah, I've devoted my entire career to family law and really becoming an expert in all areas of family law. And I will say that I will confirm that I will never venture into any other area of law. I'm old enough now that I'm pretty settled in just, really fine-tuning my knowledge and expanding on my knowledge in this very, in the area involving families with a real child focus. I have to say that I really have a soft spot for children and making sure that that we're doing the best we can as a court for children, their families, and their futures. And this impacts communities, right? It impacts communities at all levels. So the family court, it's a privilege to be a family court judge, and it's a deep, deep responsibility. And I have to say, way back when I took the bench initially, I remember calling Judge Hallmark, and because I still call her Judge Hallmark out of respect, and I don't know how to address her any other way, but I remember calling her and saying, you made this look way easier than it is. This is a very difficult job. And certainly it took me a number of years to acquire the skill set necessary to make sure that I was truly understanding the stories and the families that were coming before me, and feeling very deeply confident that I was doing a good job judging, a very good job judging. And I've worked really hard to be an excellent judge. And I've found that the biggest secret in being a good judge is listening. And I've become a very good listener. On the bench, that is the most important skill that I developed over the years, was to deeply listen to those before the court and truly understand their story, their perspective. And not only so that I would get the court determinations correct and issue opinions and court decisions that would, withstand appellate scrutiny and be the best thing in my mind for this family, but also so that families and individuals who come before the court feel that they are truly being listened, that their story is being heard. And that is critical. And that is part of the transparency and access to justice that is critical for all people who are navigating the court.
Lisa, this is important. Why don't you give our viewers a little bit like a peek behind the bench based upon your 10 years of experience of some of the areas that you cover as a family court judge?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's interesting because when you think about all that entails in family law, it's basically every topic that you can think of. When I think of family law, my mind goes to families with children and all that brings with it. But that's not all that the family court hears. So a windup of a marriage is like a windup of a business. And when you think about the ramifications, financial, oftentimes there could be a bankruptcy, or there could be a business, a closely held business, or a family-owned business, or an interest in a business that has to be valued. And that brings in tax experts and business valuations. And so there are nuances to that, or appointments of receivers, because the court needs to marshal assets and needs help in protecting assets of a marriage. So it's wide ranging. It goes from taxes to bankruptcy to winding up a business or being involved in business valuations. And thankfully, we have those experts who work in conjunction with family law attorneys who help litigants in the court provide the information to the court that is necessary. But then there's also the social issues, right? The reason I got a master's degree was because the entire time I was a judge, I often wondered why we didn't have social workers in the court to help triage the cases that involved more social issues than business issues and transactional issues. And I often thought that there should be a different track for those type of cases where they could be triaged and the social issues be addressed right up front, so that to help the court in making court determinations within the legal authority, which I always thought would be beneficial to the families. If we get to the root cause of the conflict that brought the family to court sooner than later, then I think that the data suggests that we will see these litigants less often in post-judgment, and cases will settle in a manner that the family is more satisfied with.
You bring a very interesting skill set. And what I'd like to ask you now, Lisa, is what are some of your goals as a judge?
So it is to bring my experience immediately to the bench and to be able to carry on the work that I started in my first 10 years. I bring a deep perspective of the family court and some novel ideas of how I can help improve outcomes for families who appear before me. That is my goal, to improve outcomes for families who appear before me, for individuals who appear before me, and to bring my style of judging, which is to listen and to thoughtfully carry that responsibility of making decisions for families. I was also a big fan of interdisciplinary teamwork, wraparound work for families. And I would hope that to carry that on in the Oakland County Court. There are so many professionals who can help guide families and even family law attorneys to help families make their own decisions so that they don't have to have a judge make decisions for them. And I found that very useful in the court when I would be able to identify professionals to help families and attorneys help resolve the issues so that I didn't have to make the decision for the family.
You're raising some very good points. I mean, it's like you're there to make decisions, and that's the role of a judge. But the goal is also to help people make their own decisions, because sometimes the best decisions are those made by the litigants themselves, again, with the help of experts, because you go on to your next case, but the family has to rebuild and live with whatever decisions are made either by themselves or by you as a judge. So I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. I mean, you bring such a wealth of experience. It's very impressive, and I know you did a great job when you were on the bench for those 10 years. What other things do you want the public to know about you while we're having this discussion?
Yeah, I think that, I authentically do want to return to public service and bring the knowledge that I've acquired over time as a lawyer, as a judge, and now with my social work degree. I will say that I became known as a judge who was very predictable. If you were provided an opportunity to give me the facts, I would apply the law, and you could guess what the outcome was going to be. And that's important. So following the law 100% of the time is key to being a good judge. And, as part of being a seasoned judge and a skilled judge is understanding that while attorneys and litigants are before you arguing different areas of the law, different presumptions, different standards, it is up to the judge to correctly decide what law is applying to the facts. And again, that goes back to the facts are important to understand them thoroughly, and that goes back to the listening that is so key and essential. And one of the things you learn early on as a judge is you're no longer an advocate. You are no longer there to ask your questions or to take a position. It's very clear that you are there to sit and listen and make sure that you have a clear understanding of what those facts are. As clear as that is, you have to have clearly an understanding of the law that applies, and you have to apply the correct law. So what I did as a judge was understand that I was writing opinions for not only the family, but also for the Court of Appeals, because it was very important to me, and I was very aware that if I got it wrong at the trial court level and it went to the Court of Appeals, it would mean that I would be overturned and the family's life would once again be disrupted. And I was very aware of that. And so my writing style was always to the audience of the Court of Appeals, obviously keeping in consideration that this was going to be for the family as well, but very well aware that this could go before a panel of the Court of Appeals. And it was really important that I wrote clearly and wrote correctly, applied the correct law to the facts so that the family's life would not be disrupted. Years later, when it finally got to the Court of Appeals and back, I was very aware that the family by that point had moved on under my order, and it was very important that I got it right.
Lisa, you're raising some good points because, when you read appellate decisions, if there's an error of law or facts, then the family has to go through, perhaps many more years of litigating, and, they can't move on to the next chapter. They can't start healing. What I'd like you to do next is take us behind the scenes, because as a judge, you have many other people working with you. So tell us what the staff is like for a judge and how it would be in Oakland County.
So in Wayne County and Oakland County are quite different with staffing.
Right.
So staffing in Wayne County was each judge in the family court is provided one court clerk and one staff attorney. And in Oakland County, there is a larger staff for the judge to work with. So it's my understanding that when I was Judge Hallmark's court clerk, there were two of us. The judge also had a staff attorney and an assistant, administrative assistant, to help, along with the friend of the court. And so I can say that one of the difficulties during COVID for me working in Wayne County, and one of the reasons that I took into consideration for leaving the bench, not only personal but professionally, was that the staffing shortage that the courts across the country faced really hit Wayne County very hard. And personally, in my chambers, I lost my staff attorney. She was a Canadian lawyer who decided that crossing the border was far too difficult, and understandably. And I wasn't able to hire a permanent staff attorney after that. So for my last year, I navigated a docket with just my clerk, who works for me this day in my consulting business. And so we had one another. It was me and a clerk. And it was a long, difficult year for both the litigants and for me. And so I can say that staffing is critical for judges. We rely upon staff. We rely upon staff to assist us navigate a docket in a really timely manner, to be diligent about making sure that we're hearing matters, so that families aren't waiting to be in line to be heard by the court. So that would be something I would be looking forward to, is being able to have a staff to help me navigate and help the Oakland County families that come to the family court.
What advice would you like to leave with our viewers as part of this interview? I mean, you've covered a lot of territory. You've given us a lot of food for thought. I mean, you have so much experience. You have one thing I think you have that a lot of judges have lacked over the years. You have a lot of compassion, and you have just a lifetime of experience that really relates well to being a judge. And I think that's an excellent quality to have. So what I'd like to do in the following moments is have you share any other views with us before we sign off.
Yeah, I think, keeping in mind what your podcast is, Gracefully Graying, right? So, yep. We go back many, many years, you and I, and we're talking 26 years when I started my legal career. You can do it. I turned 60 this year, and I've got a lot to offer. And I can tell you, getting my master's degree with younger kids, I could see it was harder. It was difficult. It was enriching, and it was wonderful, and I felt very privileged to be able to do it. But I knew that it was harder on me than it was on the 25-year-old who was sitting next to me, right? But let me just say that, with age comes wisdom. And in this area, maybe not in all areas of life, but in this area, I carry with me quite a bit of wisdom and a deep commitment to public service, to the family court. Oakland County voters have a unique opportunity to vote for a judge with my amount of experience and perspective and purpose. And my purpose is to help families navigate the family court with improved outcomes. And that was my goal for going to school, back to school. And that is my goal for being part of this election process. I'm doing it because I truly believe that I can give back to the families of Oakland County with a deep desire to help families navigate this court, this difficult time in their lives, with improved outcomes, with my perspective, responsibility of my past I know what the responsibility is of being a judge, and I welcome that responsibility once again.
Before we sign off, I think our viewers should understand that the family court is more than just divorce, but there's child custody. I don't know, is adoption part of the family court, or is that probate court?
Adoption through adoption through the child protective proceedings and through that court, which is the family court, certainly.
And again, you deal with personal protection orders where there's domestic violence issues. That becomes part of the family court as well. So there are a lot of areas, and I think it's important that when you think of divorce, you think of divorce happening at all ages. There can be people in their 20s, 30s, and then you have long-term marriages or second or third marriages where people are getting divorced as old as their 60s and even 70s. So you really deal with a lifetime of issues. And all I can say is you were an excellent judge and you had a long, distinguished career. Before we sign off, are there any final words?
Well, I'm grateful for our friendship, and I'm grateful for this opportunity and your kind words, Henry. I deeply appreciate what you do through this podcast and through your work over the years in the family court. You are certainly, I stand on your shoulders as an excellent example of what you can do in the family court and what you can do as a family law practitioner as an expert in the area, and that is you. And I'm deeply grateful for the pathway that you set forth for all of us practitioners, and the excellent example you've set over the years, Henry.
Thank you so much. Lisa Neilson, judicial candidate, and I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Graying. I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Graying, and of course our sponsors in Bloomfield Cable for making Gracefully Graying possible. Thank you so much.